Dust still hung in the air when the crowd's laughter turned into a roar. A young cowboy named Jesse Cole lay flat on his back in the dirt, his hat crushed under his own boot heel, staring up at the wide Texas sky like he wasn't sure which year it was. 20 seconds. That was all he'd lasted. 20 seconds, and he'd bragged for a whole week beforehand that he could ride anything with 4 legs. The black mare, Midnight, stood at the far end of the corral, chest heaving, ears flat against her skull. Her black coat was slick with sweat and shining like river stone. She stamped one hoof hard into the ground, and the fence posts around her seemed to shiver with the sound. "Get up, Jesse," someone hollered from the fence rail. "She ain't done with you yet." The crowd laughed harder. Men slapped their knees. A boy near the front spat a sunflower seed into the dust and grinned like he'd just watched the finest show of his life. Big Sam Colton stood near the gate with his thumbs hooked into his silver belt buckle, not even bothering to hide his grin. He didn't rush to help Jesse up. He never did. He liked letting a man lie there a moment, liked the crowd getting a good long look at what his mare could do to a grown fool who thought himself tough. "That's 13, Big Sam called out, loud enough for the whole street to hear. 13 men this mare has thrown, and not one of them lasted a full minute. You want to try your luck next, or has everybody finally learned some sense?" Nobody stepped forward. Jesse finally sat up, spitting dirt from his mouth, his pride bent worse than his hat. 2 men hauled him up by the arms and dragged him toward the water trough, and the crowd's laughter followed him the whole way like a pack of dogs nipping at his heels. Midnight paced the far fence line, blowing hard through her nose, eyes rolling white at the edges. She looked less like an animal and more like a black storm someone had made the mistake of putting a saddle on. Children pointed at her from behind their mother's skirts. Old men shook their heads and muttered about the devil having a hand in breeding a horse like that. "Ain't natural," one woman said, pulling her shawl tighter. "A horse with that much hate in her." Big Sam heard it and smiled wider, like the word hate was a compliment paid straight to him. Nobody in that whole crowd of laughing, gasping, head-shaking townsfolk thought to ask a different question. Nobody wondered why a horse fed the finest oats in the county, brushed by her owner's own proud hand, still trembled and struck at every single person who came near her. Nobody except one quiet woman standing far at the back, arms crossed over her plain gray dress, watching Midnight's eyes instead of her hooves. Anna Whitfield stood at the back of the crowd the way she always did, saying nothing while the town laughed itself hoarse. She watched Midnight's ears, not her hooves. She watched the way the mare's flanks trembled even when nobody stood near her. Most folks saw a monster. Anna saw something else, something she recognized from her own quiet nights on the farm, though she couldn't have named it out loud that day. 2 winters back, she had buried her husband on the hill behind their farmhouse, under a lone cottonwood tree that dropped its leaves slow and sad every fall. Thomas had been a gentle man. He wasn't reckless, wasn't foolish. A thunderstorm had rolled in fast one evening, and a young horse in their barn had spooked bad, rearing and striking out blind with fear. Thomas had only been trying to calm it. The horse hadn't meant to kill him. Fear doesn't ask permission before it lashes out, and it doesn't care how kind a man's hands are. After that, the whispers started. Anna heard them everywhere she went, at the general store, at church, even from women who smiled at her face and turned the moment she passed. "Cursed," some said. "She ought to sell up and go back east. A woman alone can't run a farm through a hard winter." Anna never answered any of it. She simply went home, fed her chickens, mended her fences, and worked until her hands ached too much to hold a grudge. Long before any of that, back in Missouri, her father had taught her something most men in Prairie Hollow never learned in their whole lives. He'd sit on the porch rail with a piece of straw between his teeth and say, "Force makes an enemy, Anna. Patience makes a friend. Any fool can pull a rope tight. It takes a wise soul to loosen it." He'd shown her how to read a horse the way other folks read a letter. "Watch the ears," he'd said. "Watch the breath. Watch how the muscles bunch up tight under the skin right before real fear takes hold." He taught her that a wild horse isn't wild because it's cruel. It's wild because somebody somewhere gave it a good enough reason to stop trusting. Anna had used that teaching on her own small farm since Thomas died, gentling 3 frightened horses with nothing but low words and long, quiet hours standing beside them until the shaking stopped. Nobody in town knew that about her. Nobody asked. So when she stood at that fence and watched midnight pace and strike and roll her eyes white with terror, Anna didn't see a devil horse born mean. She saw a creature that had been pulled and whipped and fought by every single man who'd ever climbed onto her back, not one of them patient enough to ask what the horse was so afraid of. That horse isn't angry, Anna murmured to herself, so quiet nobody else heard it. That horse is afraid. 3 years passed, and Anna's farm grew steadier under her own 2 hands, though never easy. She sold eggs and butter at the general store, mended her own fences, and kept her small herd fed through winters that tried hard to starve everything alive. The town still whispered when she walked by, but the whispers had grown thin and tired against the quiet strength she'd built up, season after season, without anyone's help. Then one spring morning, Big Sam Colton rode into town with Midnight prancing beside his wagon, her black coat catching the early sun, and he made his usual announcement outside the general store, loud enough to pull folks out from behind their counters. $100 gold to any soul who can ride my mare 15 minutes steady, he called out, laughing like he already knew the answer. Same as always, and same as always I expect to keep my money. A crowd gathered fast, the way it always did. Men shuffled forward, then back, some puffed up with false courage, some just there for the free show. And then, from the edge of the crowd, a voice spoke up that nobody in Prairie Hollow expected to hear that day. "I'll try," said Anna Whitfield. The whole street went quiet for a moment. Then it cracked open into laughter, loud and unkind. Big Sam laughed loudest of all, slapping his knee like she'd told him a fine joke. "A widow woman wants to ride Midnight. Ma'am, with respect." This horse threw a Texas Mustang tamer clean into the dirt. "What makes you think you'll last a minute?" "I don't aim to last a minute," Anna said, calm as still water on a windless day. "I aim to last 15. The crowd laughed harder still. Someone hollered that she ought to go home and tend her chickens. Someone else said the fall alone might kill a woman her size. Big Sam waved his hand like he was doing her some great kindness by even allowing it. "All right then," he said, grinning wide. "If it'll teach the town a lesson about foolish pride, so be it, but there's rules, no whip, no spurs, no rope tricks to force her still, just you, the saddle, and 15 minutes. Fair." "Fair," Anna said, not a flicker of doubt crossing her face. But before she climbed toward the fence, Anna asked for one more thing, and it made the laughing crowd fall silent all over again. "I want 30 minutes alone with her first," she said. "No crowd, no noise, just me and the horse." Big Sam frowned hard at that, chewing on the request like it tasted wrong in his mouth. But he'd already made his big show in front of the whole town, and pulling back now would look like fear dressed up as caution. So he waved his hand and agreed. The crowd was pushed back from the corral fence, grumbling and craning their necks. Anna walked in alone, slow and unhurried, her bonnet held loose in her hand instead of tied over her hair, her boots raising soft puffs of dust with every quiet step toward the waiting mare. Midnight stood at the far end of the corral, ears pinned flat, nostrils flared wide, one hoof pawing hard at the dry earth. Years of fear sat heavy in her muscles, years of being pulled and whipped and fought by every man who'd ever climbed onto her back, each one trying to break her spirit instead of earning her trust. Anna didn't walk toward her. She simply stood still near the fence and waited, letting the silence stretch long and patient between them. Minutes passed slow as syrup. Midnight watched her with wide, wary eyes, every muscle coiled tight beneath her black coat. Anna didn't move closer. She didn't raise her voice above a murmur. She spoke low and even the same soft words over and over, the way her father once spoke to frightened horses on cold Missouri mornings long before Anna ever came west. "Nobody's going to hurt you here," Anna said softly. "Not today, not by my hand." Slowly, so slowly, the crowd outside the fence grew restless, waiting on it. Midnight's ears turned forward just a little. Her nostrils softened. One trembling step brought her closer. Then another, until the space between them had nearly closed to nothing at all. By the time the 30 minutes ended, Midnight's head rested gentle against Anna's shoulder, and Anna's hand lay along the mare's long black neck, feeling that wild, frightened heartbeat slow down beneath her palm. When Anna climbed into the saddle, the crowd leaned in hard against the fence rail, certain they were about to watch her throne, same as all the rest. Midnight didn't buck. She didn't rear. She took one uncertain step, then another, and then she simply walked, calm and steady, around the corral, carrying the widow on her back like she'd known her for years instead of 30 short minutes. Big Sam's pocket watch ticked on. 1 minute, 5 minutes, 10. The laughing, jeering crowd had gone dead silent, watching in plain wonder as the horse they'd called Unbeatable carried a widow in a plain gray dress around that corral, gentle as a lamb in springtime. At 15 minutes exactly, Anna slid down from the saddle, and Midnight nuzzled her shoulder soft, like an old friend saying thank you. The crowd didn't cheer right away. They were too stunned to make a sound. Then, slow at first, the cheering rose up like a wave breaking clean over the whole town. Big Sam stood frozen, his silver belt buckle catching the sun, unable to find a single word. He'd spent years boasting that force and pride could tame anything wild, never once considering the horse wasn't wild at all. She was only afraid, and afraid creatures don't need conquering. They need someone patient enough to earn their trust. He counted the $100 in gold into Anna's palm with shaking hands. She didn't gloat over the men who'd laughed at her. She only thanked him, quiet and simple. From that day on, nobody in Prairie Hollow said nothing born of woman again. Instead, when a hard task came along, folks said, slow and steady like the widow and the mare,